say we are super pumped to finally be able to actually have a service online. I know last week we actually had a hangout, but this week we're actually jumping in. We're going to jump into the Word. I hope all of you are getting logged in. I'm sorry that we're kind of running a little bit behind, but God is good. We miss you guys so much. Me and my wife feel like we haven't seen you guys in weeks. It feels like it's been a long time, but we know that God has got great things in store for Fresh Life. We know that God has great things in store for this ministry. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you to stay faithful, continue to jump in every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We're going to be doing this. So cancel whatever plans you had with Netflix, cancel whatever plans you had with Instagram. Every Wednesday night at 8 p.m., this is what we're going to be doing, okay? So we just hope you guys are staying safe. I know amongst everything that's going on, you've got all these different things. You've got everybody saying one thing, everybody saying another thing, but we love you. We hope you're washing your hands. We hope you're getting your homework done. I know recent news I heard today is that school is going to be canceled through the rest of the year. That might be good news for some of you. Some of you might dread that news. I don't know where you're at on the spectrum, but I'm here to give you some encouragement tonight. But before we do that, I don't know if anybody mentioned it yet, but tonight is actually April Fool's Day. April 1st is April Fool's Day. And so growing up, I was a prankster myself. So a lot of people that know me know that I have had a history of pranking people, doing things to cause a little fun. But I was just looking online at Facebook, and I seen somebody post something about an April Fool's Day joke that they said that they wanted to try, and I thought it was particularly funny. So I know it's 8:10. There's a little less than 4 hours left in the day, but I want you students to try this one out on your parents if you can. But it goes like this. So basically, today's April Fool's Day, right? Anytime your parent comes up to you and asks you to do something, whether it's take out the trash, whether it is finish your homework, whether it's lights out, whatever it is, this is what you do. You look at them serious as a heart attack, square in their eye, and you say, I'm on to you. You can't fool me. And then you just turn around and just walk away. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm actually going to try that on my wife tonight, and I'll let you know how it goes. So we'll see. But I just want to encourage you guys before we hop into this. Stay faithful. Stay in a good attitude. Keep your heart in the right place. And it's okay to laugh. It's okay to have fun during this time for many of us that are fearful, for many of us that are struggling during this time. But before we jump into the message, for this month, for April, we're going to be starting a series, and it's called Weather the Storm. I believe it's appropriate not only because of the season of spring that we're moving into, but also the season of life that we're in. Weather the storm. And so we're in a season of a lot of uncertainty. We're in a season where a lot of things are happening that are beyond us. And so I encourage us as we jump into this to take on that mindset of never quit, never give up. We're not gonna have fear. We're not gonna be complacent. We're gonna stay in that middle steady ground and keep our eyes fixed and have faith. But before we get into the word, there was a movie that me and my wife just recently watched, and it was called Adrift. And it was about this couple that they sailed the world. They were on a sailboat. They sailed the world, and they happened to come across a very, very violent storm. And this storm was so violent to the point to where it completely wrecked the boat. The boat was barely hanging on by a thread. One of the partners actually ended up dying, but the female actually ended up surviving 45 days she had no water, she had nothing, she had to literally drink rainwater, everything. And it was during this 45 days that her mind was so focused on weathering the storm that she was actually able to live. She was stranded somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. She had one shot to make it to Hawaii. If she missed Hawaii with no navigation system, if she missed Hawaii, she would not have the strength to make it all the way to Japan. So she had one shot to get her coordinates right, to weather the storm that she had been through. And she made it. And when she got there to Hawaii, the entire time, this is based on a true story, when she got there, the entire time, she thought that the husband was alive the entire time. She thought that he was with her the entire time. She thought that he was helping her the entire time, but he wasn't. It was all a figment of her imagination. But I'm here to tell you tonight, before we jump into this, that sometimes when it feels like everything is going wrong, at the end of the day, Jesus is right there by our side when we feel adrift, when we're weathering the storm, when things are going wrong. So let's jump into this. As we know, springtime brings storms. It brings hail, it brings thunder, it brings lightning, it brings floods. It brings all of those things. But we know that if we don't have springtime, then we won't have the flowers. If we don't have springtime, if we don't have the storm, then we won't have the fruit on the trees. If we don't have springtime, then we don't have all of these avenues of life. And so the storm might seem devastating, but in the end, it brings life. So the storm of our current life, COVID-19, coronavirus, whatever it is that you might call it. I've heard people joke around and call it Winnie the flu. But it is very serious. And regardless of if we're making light of the situation, we're in a storm of uncertainty. And so if you have your Bibles, which I know you do, you're at home. Many of you students like to say that you forgot your Bible at home, but tonight you're at home, so you have no excuse. So hop off your bed, wherever you are, go get your Bible, bust it out. Tonight's text, we're going to be reading from Matthew chapter 8, verse 23 through 27. So I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. But it says this, it says, "Then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. Suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with waves breaking into the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, shouting, 'Lord, save us, we're going to drown.' Jesus responded, 'Why are you afraid? You have so little faith.' Then he got up and rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. The disciples were amazed. 'Who is this man?' they asked. 'Even the wind and the waves obey him.' Even the wind and the waves obey him." The disciples marveled. But in this story, I see a number of things. I see the fact that they're on a boat. I see the fact that they're going across the Sea of Galilee, which is relatively large. I've never seen it, but to my knowledge, it's relatively wide at its widest point, maybe 7 miles. It's a giant lake. But the waves during a storm on this lake, I've researched, can grow in upwards of 15 feet. And so if you can imagine the little boat that they might have been in versus the very large waves that they were atop of, and the water was crashing in, you can imagine that they might have been kind of scared. And then you have Jesus who's just chilling, sleeping. Another translation says he was laying down on a pallet. Like, he was so comfortable. He was not afraid at all. And so I find it interesting that Jesus said, after he woke up, he said, "Why are you afraid? You have such little faith." And so that leads me to believe what might have happened had they not woke Jesus up. What might have happened had they not woke Jesus up? He said, "Why are you afraid? You have such little faith." And I'm thinking in my head, well, Jesus, would the storm have continued to rage had I not woken you up? And so I find this so intriguing, but Jesus didn't wake up. He didn't say, "What in the world? I wish you would have woken me up sooner. I wish you wouldn't have letting it got this bad." But he doesn't say any of that. He says, "Why are you afraid? You have such little faith." And so this leads me to believe that God cares more about our faith through the storm than whether or not he calms it. He's going to calm the storm, but he cares more about our faith through that. He cares more about our faith through that. Our faith can never be determined by the circumstances of life. In that moment, the faith of the disciples had been replaced with fear. Circumstance had stripped away their faith and replaced it with fear. And so I don't know where you are tonight in the midst of all the things that are going on in this life. I don't know where you are tonight in regards to the crisis that is at hand. Maybe you feel like one of the disciples in the boat, tossed to and fro, and you're just crying out to God. But what is it that you're crying out to God for? Is it out of faith or is it in fear? We have to maintain that attitude of faith, regardless of how violent the sea seems, regardless of how violent everything seems to be going around us. God cares more about your faith in the storm than whether or not he calms it in our time frame. If it was up to us, everything would be glassy seas. If it was up to you and I know that our life would be picture perfect. One of my favorite quotes ever is by the famous Bruce Lee. He said this. He said, "Let us not pray for an easy life, but for the strength to endure a difficult one." And so more often than not, I find that we are so often trying to find the easiest path, find the easiest road. The disciples, they didn't have to get in the boat and go across the sea, but Jesus told them, "Get in the boat, we're going across the sea." And he knew the storm was going to happen. He's laying there sleeping. But the trial produces something within us, students. The trial produces something within us to the point to where it says in James, "Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, because you know that the trying of your faith works patience. And when patience has its perfect work, you'll be perfect, you'll be entire, you won't be lacking anything." And so I don't know whether or not you feel like one of the disciples in the storm tonight. But this I know is that it says it is impossible without faith to please God. Where are you tonight? It is impossible without faith to please God. We all know, many of us know the story in the Old Testament of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they said, they were being told they were going to be cast into a fiery furnace. And they said, "We believe that God will deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we still believe." And so they believed God. Their faith wasn't hinged upon whether or not the fire was put out. Their faith was hinged upon God and God alone. And so tonight, as I'm reading this story, I saw some contrasts. As I'm reading this story, I couldn't help but notice that the disciples were in it. They were in the worst of the worst. They were on the waves. Everything was crashing down around them. But I couldn't help but think of the people that weren't in the boat. There was people that were in their homes while the storm was going on. There was people that were in their house while the storm was going on who had no idea about what was happening to the disciples on the sea. And so on either extreme tonight, you might find yourself in the boat. You might find yourself fearing what's to come. But at the same time, you might find yourself in such a way that you've become complacent to all this, and you're like, honestly, this is not affecting me. You know, I'm good. I'm hanging out in my house. I'm watching Netflix. I'm eating my snacks. I'm doing everything. I'm just riding this out. I really don't care about what's going on outside my doors. And that's a dangerous place to be as Christians, students, because we have to get to a place to where we're not fearful like the disciples, but we're not complacent like, let's just say, someone might be in a lighthouse. Someone in a lighthouse might be tempted to turn their light off. There's nobody out there on the sea. As Christians, it's been 3-4 weeks now that we've been going through this. We might be tempted to turn our light off. We might be tempted to say, you know what, like this is not a big deal. We might be tempted to close our Bible. We might be tempted to stop praying, to stop reading. We might be tempted to do all these different things. We might be tempted to become complacent. But Jesus cares more about our transformation than our momentary benefit. We might be pumped that school got out for the rest of the year. We might be super happy that we don't have to go to school, that we can just chill at home. We might be so happy about all these things, but during this time, we're not without responsibility. Students, I know you might be confined to the four walls of your home, but you have a responsibility to pray for those that are going through this. Whenever we're dealing with something, it matters more than anything else. But if we're not dealing with something, we don't choose to normally care about the things that someone else is going through. And so I urge you tonight, put yourself in the shoes of those around us. It's funny, it's goofy. I know there's a lot of things on Netflix, a lot of things on Instagram. Everybody's like going crazy with the memes. We're having a good time. We're having a party. It's awesome. But let's not forget the healthcare workers. Let's not forget the students who have healthcare workers as parents. Let's not forget the people who are being stretched thin during this time. And so, students, if the Tiger King has taken the rightful place of the one true king, then we have a problem. And I know I'm being funny, but if we've made greater covenant with Netflix or Instagram than greater covenant with God, then we have to take a step back. And so I charge you with this thought. If the length in which this pandemic lasts was dependent on your prayers, not anybody else's prayers, but your prayers, you that are watching. If the length in which this pandemic lasts was dependent upon your prayers, how are we going about our days? And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't take advantage of family time. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take advantage of time spent with loved ones, getting our schoolwork done, all these different things. But I am saying is that we have to have a right mind going into this, one that is not of complacency, because your neighbor might be feeling a little differently than you are. So no matter what side of the storm you're on tonight, you're called to weather it. You're called to push through. The disciples didn't jump ship. You're not called to turn off your lighthouse light. You're called to shine brighter and brighter. And so our example tonight is Jesus. It's very simple. The gospel is very simple, but it's very profound. Our example is Jesus. Our example is the one who was on the boat, but without fear and all faith. Our example is the one who's in the house, but not complacent, full of light, a city shining on a hill. We might not be able to get out and go do what we've normally done in our day, but thank God because of technology, thank God because of social media, we can still shine our light. There's people that are posting about how their family members are, they know somebody who might know somebody who might know somebody that's dealing with the sickness. And we can shine our light to them rather than closing off to the world and trying to act like none of this is actually going on. So as students, I know you have priorities. I know you have things going on, but let's band together. Me and my wife, we love you guys. We miss you guys, but we know that before any of this happened, you guys were all about getting out into the community, reaching people, touching people, praying for people. You guys have the power to do that within your own homes. And so I challenge you to walk in that. Find somebody, check in on your friends from school. Ask them if any of their family members are sick, if there's anything that you can pray for. Be willing to shine that light. If you weren't bold enough to do it at school, at least be bold enough during this season to stretch yourself a little and send them a message and say, hey, is everything all right? Is everything going good? So I don't care what your circumstance is tonight. God's calling us to speak peace to the storm. Speak peace to the storm. You got the people on land who could care less about what's going on in the boat. You got the disciples who all they can think about is them drowning. But then you have Jesus who speaks peace to the storm. And that's where he calls us to be. So tonight, the people that are around you that are fearful, speak peace to the storm. Tonight, if you see a boat out in the distance, you see a family that's struggling, you see people that are dealing with a lot, speak peace to the storm. Tonight, if you yourself are struggling in such a way, speak peace over your own storm. He's given that authority. The disciples said, what man is this that even the wind and waves obey him? Who is this Jesus that even worry and complacency, fear, obey him. Who is this Jesus that even sickness and disease obey him? And who is this Jesus that has given me and you students the same authority? And so tonight as we close, I just want you guys, if you're not alone, if you are alone, wherever you are, just begin to ponder this in your heart. Jesus, when I don't see an end in sight, increase my faith. When I'm tempted to think about me, myself, and I, and me only, increase my faith for those around me. God, when I'm tempted to think about only how things are getting worse, God, increase my faith. And so tonight, God is more concerned about your faith through the storm than whether or not the storm ceases in our own time frame. And so, Father, I pray for these students right now. I pray for anybody watching this, anybody who can hear the sound of my voice right now. God, you are already there. Father, you're omnipresent, God, and I ask right now that as we close, Lord, that tonight, God, I pray that many of these students were stirred up in love and good works. God, I pray, Lord, that their faith would be stirred, God, that they would continue to look at this in a perspective, God, that not only focuses on self, but, God, those around us. God, I pray that we would take on the attitude of Jesus. I pray that we would speak peace to the storm, even when we don't feel it. I pray that we would speak peace to the storm for the sake of those around us. And God, we know that you're in complete and total control. Father, I pray for any students right now, God, who've been questioning their faith, who've been questioning their relationship with you. God, how could you allow this to happen? God, how could you let this go this way? But God, we know that you're in complete and total control. God, we choose to walk in faith even when we don't see. And Father, I thank you for these students. I don't know how many students are watching tonight, but I thank you guys for tuning in. We know that despite how long this lasts for, that God is still advancing the kingdom, that we are still doing everything that we can to reach out to you guys. I know that there is a screen between us, but God is doing awesome things. And so continue to just pour into your friends. Continue to be that light. Continue to speak peace over the storm. And me and my wife love you so much. We miss you so much. Many of you got to meet Asher during our hangout last week. If you haven't, there's pictures on our profile. But we can't wait to get back together with y'all and have an amazing time. But in the meantime, stay strong. We love you. And we will be tuning in again at 7 p.m. on Sunday night, 8 p.m. on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. on Sunday night. So if you have, if you don't have anything going on, which many of us don't, then tune in, invite your friends. We'll have links put up. But we love you, and we hope that you have an awesome night and an awesome rest of your week.